and spoke about the financial system and how anthropology thinks about that. And this week I'm going to pick a very specific part of that system and want to share some very initial ideas of how I as a person, and we get to that in a second, and anthropology as a discipline might understand venture capital investing. I am a VC person myself. I've worked in that industry for a while, and I'm a researcher, and one of the things I want to do with you today is figure out how that goes together. So in 2015, Amazon Prime has already been on the market for about 10 years, meaning that people were able to ship with next day delivery more or less for free with Amazon if they had a Prime account. For all of the other services out there in the e-commerce world, that was not yet really possible or very expensive, so you would pay £5, £6, £7 extra for next day shipping. And there were quite a few things happening in the startup world that were taking that problem on. So one of the things at the time we looked at, and when I say that in this particular context, means a family office I've worked for in Germany, and I'll get back to that. How is this particular industry of transportation, of delivery, how is that going to be revolutionized, particularly coming from a digital point of view? So my boss and I had a look, and I ultimately spoke to about 20, 25 different startups. What that means is I got in touch, looked at different accelerators, looked at different demo days from companies like Y Combinator, got in touch with the companies and had phone conversations with them. They would send me a deck. I would go through the deck, ask them questions, and we would have a chat. And you do kind of a comparative, how does one go about solving this problem and how does that compare to the other one, until you come to a smaller selection of about 3 or 4. And then you dig down a little bit deeper. So you get Excel sheets with their business plans, with how they think about the future, what kind of new products they're going to bring to the market. And in the end, we decided on investing in a company called ShipOp, which went through Y Combinator, which is likely the most important accelerator in the world in San Francisco. And they solved this problem. And to date, they're still very much alive. They're the biggest e-commerce shipping company in the world, so far coming out of the US, but they're bound to make this jump over to Europe or Asia sometime soon. They have warehouses in San Francisco, in New York, in Chicago, in Dallas, and they help any company that does e-commerce to do their warehousing and their next day / 2-day delivery to the same price that they would pay if they went to the post office themselves and they give you packaging for free. Why am I telling you that story? So the whole venture capital approach is finding these companies. You look at a certain industry, in this case, it was shipping, delivery. Amazon already does it. It can't be that complicated. There must be people around there who can do it in a similar way for non-Amazons, right? So the ShipOp's claim is actually, we do Amazon-like logistics for any e-commerce company. And then you dig, you find this market, you have a thesis, this must be happening on a broader scale soon. And then you find companies that are starting to do that. And you might have seen either of these. So Dragon's Den is what's happening in Britain when it comes to people like ShipOp pitching on the stage like that. Shark Tank is the equivalent in Germany, and this is in the States, and this is what happens in Germany. That's the only version of a VC-type process, the same that I just described, in quite a few more words, that you can see on television. Where an entrepreneur comes and they have this idea and a vision, and they're presenting it on stage to a panel of judges, investors. In the case of this, actually, all of this, they're not venture capital people, they're more angel investors, i.e. they have their own money, they come from certain industries, and they invest their own funds. But the idea is the same. There's a guy who has a vision to make something different with his particular idea, and that there's people who say, yeah, I believe that person, I want to back him or her with money, and go on to that journey with that person. that's in a sense what VC is about. You want to find a disruptive startup that does something slightly differently than a big corporate at the right time, and then give them money, basically. And in brackets, some other stuff too. We come to that in a second. Now, why is that important, particularly in a context where my former research project was on the other end of, if you wish, the wealth ladder? I looked at homeless people and how they survive. Why is this an important part of the world economy at the moment? These numbers are actually tiny, so forget about the absolute numbers. What's interesting is that for the last, it goes back quite a bit further. For the last decade or so, we've been seeing venture capitalists, and this is only Europe, which is much smaller again than the States, and actually China is catching up tremendously quickly, soaring. And we've seen companies, and these are just some of the new ones that you know. Amazon actually itself, Microsoft, they were all originally funded by VCs in their early stages. These are some of the new companies that come out of this boom. Airbnb, Uber, TransferWise, recently Spotify, that just went public, obviously. iZettle, both of them were funded by a Scandinavian VC called Northern. So what I'm saying is that, without even looking at the numbers, a lot of what we are currently experiencing as our economy is already made by venture capital. The original decisions on, we let this company through and this, and not this, and not this, is taken by VCs. So understanding what's happening there and how these VCs go about their decisions is quite crucial in order to see what the economy is like now, and even more importantly, what the economy is like in the future. And I, again coming back to the first lecture Anna and I had on this together, and thinking a little bit about what does an anthropologist actually do on a day-to-day basis, I took on this problem because I think it's an important part of the equation if you want to see how the economy is developing in the future, and study it anthropologically. And at the moment, and this project is ongoing for the next 3 years, and it just really started beginning of 2018. At the moment that means I'm doing 3 different things. The work I described, which led to the investment in ShipOp, is the first pillar here. I work in a family office, which could be a venture capital company, but the difference is we haven't raised money, i.e. we haven't found other institutional investors like pension funds to give us money. We invest our own, so to speak. But we only invest in ventures. So traditionally a family office would be 80% stocks, or 50% stocks, 40% real estate, and 10% wine and art. Some of them do a little bit of entrepreneurship, so to speak. And this one, because the money actually comes from an entrepreneur who started Swudo in Germany, which was then sold to Kayak and is currently doing Home to Go. He's relatively young. He made his money with splitting up ventures himself. He said, I want to give it back into the ecosystem, so here you go, got a couple of million. Find interesting startups to invest. So the process I'm going to describe in a second is something that I've been doing on a day-to-day basis on the side for the last 5 to 6 years. And that's part of my field work. It's what is participant observation, anthropology, and I work for this family office and then try and kind of step out of my role there, observing myself, writing about that. The second is a bit more straightforwardly sociological, if you wish. I do expert interviews. And the goal is to cover about 150 to 200 venture capital partners in Germany, the UK, and the US, which is kind of the scale that is doable in the course of a 2-3 year project. I've already seen about 60 of them, mostly so far in Germany and the UK, and I'm going to the US next year for 4 months to San Francisco and New York and interview as many people as possible there to see as many views onto that industry as I can get my hands on. And they're all qualitative, i.e. I don't have a survey, I don't have any kind of structure, even a structured interview guide doesn't really exist. You'll see the kind of things that I make for myself as the last slide here, which is very big questions that I then usually take slowly into an interview. And the last thing I do is I go to industry conferences that are venture capital type, or family offices, or institutional investors. The last week, actually, the NOAA happened in London. I wasn't there, that's why I didn't put it out there. But that's one of the big startup conferences where a lot of startups come in and a lot of investors, and they kind of all want to talk to each other. And ideally, some of them find each other and invest in them. And that gives me a little bit more of a large-scale observational overview of how's this industry working, how do these people interact, how's the entrepreneur getting hold of the investor and the other way around. Has any one of you ever had any contact with a venture capital fund / people that work in it, and do you have a clue what they're doing?
I did an internship at the VC this summer.
Where were you?
It was in Budapest. So it was a VC which managed a fund, a government-owned fund. So redistributed it to Hungarian startups, mainly from outside of Budapest, to like regional development plan.
And how big were the tickets normally?
It was small scale, like really pre-seed phase.
I.e. they invested 50K,
First more, yeah, around 50.
An early stage.
Yes.
So the VC usually works always in the same way, and this is a good example because there's a couple of parameters which are variable, but in very limited ways. So if you ask a VC, what's your investment hypothesis, which is kind of exactly this bit, they're either early stage investors or late stage investors, which then implies that they invest a lot of money when they're late stage. Think Uber is raising around now, they're collecting 500 million, you can't come and give them 500 grand. You kind of have to write a ticket of 50, 75 million. Or you start very early stage when the company is just about to grow, and you can put in 50,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds, 250,000 pounds. That's one of the very, very important indicators. And everything I'm saying at the moment, and all of the experiences that I report on, is mostly early stage ventures. Because there the decision making is quite different from what often comes after the venture fund, which is a private equity fund. Much less numbers, the company isn't as old, they're much more focused on, we have this vision, we have an idea, we want to make this happen, than, look, we've been in operation for 5 years, this is the numbers, this is how many products we've sold, this is how many services we've offered. And then they usually have a geographical / product focus. So most funds wouldn't invest everywhere into anything. They usually have to say, okay, we're looking at Hungary, or we're looking at Europe. Or if they're a global investor, they would say, but we only do software as a service, or we only do industry 2.0. So they kind of have to focus a little bit just because you want to have a little bit of expertise. And with these parameters, you can kind of describe any VC in the world. And how then they go about the process, I think, varies very little from what I've seen so far. It's exactly how I described in the beginning with the ShipOp example, just often the other way around. So if you're a well-known venture capital investor, they come to you. All of the startups want to get funding, and you get thousands of decks. Decks meaning a PowerPoint presentation which kind of captures the idea of what you want to do with your startup. And say you invest in about 10 companies a year, and people know that, and you've been in operation for a handful of years, you get somewhere between 2,500 and 5,000 decks. So 5,000 companies that come to your inbox either completely cold or through an introduction, and want you to give them money, so they send you information of what they're doing. And you screen these opportunities. That's what an analyst, that's what I would be doing on a day-to-day basis. If I was working full-time, that would be a lot of the work I would be doing. I would be looking at these decks, and then decide which is an interesting idea, potentially, again, going back to what I said about ShipOp before, based on certain theses that we've put up. So we are looking at the shipping industry at the moment. So I'm particularly interested in finding companies that revolutionize, digitalize that space. And then deciding on a certain list of checkbox factors almost, which of these 5,000 do I actually want to talk to? The deck only gives away that much information. You really want to get to know the people. So either a face-to-face meeting or a phone conversation normally will be the next step. And you come from there in a funnel, which is very much what this is called, the deal flow funnel. So you put all of the companies up there, and you have certain criteria, and I'll talk about that in a second, that get you to your about 12 investments a year. Let it be 8, let it be 15. A normal VC wouldn't invest in 25 very likely, and they wouldn't invest in 2. So it's a relatively small number that comes from a very big number of potential investments. And there are certain questions that I saw so far that really drive you along that way. So as I said, the first one, you have these 5,000 decks. You need to screen about 5,000 opportunities, meaning about 10, 15, 20 a week, 200 a week. You need to be able to quickly say, this is potentially yes or potentially no. And that comes back to what you just said, Robert. Are they early enough or are they too late? What round are they raising? Are they raising a 1 million seed round, or are they raising a 75 million late stage growth round? That often kicks a lot of companies out. Are they in the right industry? Do we understand what they're doing or not? Do we have any expertise in this, or are we interested in this? This kicks another big chunk of the companies out. So are they ticking the right boxes that are predefined, kind of as this is what our fund does? Are they in the right geography, or are they completely outside? Do we do anything in Asia? If not, everything Asian is out. And it's more likely that a warm email, so a friendly VC that you often work together with, forwards you an email from an entrepreneur that somehow doesn't fit into their portfolio, but he knows, oh, she might be able to work with you. You're much more likely to take that into the next stage immediately and call that person. And then that's where it gets interesting, and I'll dive into that again in a second. There's totally different things that suddenly play a role. Once you've made it from this, they tick certain boxes, and one of the other boxes is obviously it's a company that is actually a potential investment case for VC. So they need to be scalable, meaning often with technology, which is what a lot of VCs will specialize on now, you need to be able to reach a lot of people quite quickly. If you're just selling a product, almost in a kind of wholesale way, that in a lot of cases wouldn't be a great VC case. Because you need a certain amount of capital, but you can't scale massively. Some case like Skyscanner or Kayak is great, because you build a platform, and that's relatively complex. The algorithm of figuring out this is the best flight for your wish here and there is relatively complex to build. But once you've built the platform, the more people use it, the more money you make, but you don't actually have an insane amount of extra costs. Yes, you need to upkeep and maintain the platform, and you kind of work on your algorithm as you go along, and you add other product features. But the core product, once it's built, it's out there, and you just make money the more people you reach. That's an ideal VC case. So the boxes are ticked, and then you do a call. And what a lot of people that I spoke to tell you then is, and then it's all about people. Do I get along with the person I'm talking to? Literally, can I stand that person? And if not, it's really hard for me to make an investment into that company, because a VC usually commits to work with a company for about a decade. That's the normal fund horizon. If you talk about traditional VCs, you raise a certain amount of money, say 50 million, 100 million, 150 million, from investors, and you tell them, I'm going to pay you back in 10 years. So you have 10 years time to find companies, invest in them, and get a payout of these particular investments. Meaning, the first year or two is spent searching for companies, doing all of this basically, arriving here, having a couple of red dots, or 10, 15, 20 red dots, and then you sit there. And you sit and you work with these companies, and you hope that one or two of them, and one is enough normally, is going to become a unicorn, i.e. a company that's worth £1 billion or more. So you're working with them for a long time. We're talking 8 years. Sometimes it goes beyond the 10 years. Sometimes it might be 12 years. So if you can't stand the person that you're seeing there in your first call, or your second, or your third, depending on how far you go along, that 10 years might be a drag. Because they will be in touch with you. They will have questions for you. That's the second bit that the VC does. They give you money, but they also, at least most of them claim, add value by helping you with strategic decisions, i.e., should I expand into China or not? Have you got experience into that particular area? Who do I hire for my head of sales now that I am big in the States but want to expand into Europe? Do you have contacts? I need to raise another round. Can you help me with finding other VCs that you've worked with before, you know the run is going to be significantly better and bigger, introduce me to other VCs. So there is the expectation, for good reason, that throughout this 10-year, 8-year period, you're going to be in constant touch with the companies that you invest in. So that, I think, is the most important bit. And as I said, we get to that in a second again, when it comes to the first call, what's your intuition? And then what is called the due diligence process, which is something we also do in consulting, gets a little bit more analytical. They send you an Excel file, this is our business case, this is how we want to grow in the next 3, 4, 5 years. This is the terms and conditions of this particular investment case. You're basically searching for issues. Once you've taken a decision, yeah, this is an interesting case, they're in the right market, they're going to grow, so that the VC funding would make sense, and I like the people, the team has great experience, I get along with them. Is there anything wrong with it? Did they have problems in the past? Is there any kind of red flag that you can find that doesn't fit in and that would devalidate your potential investment? And then the last decision is taken very much again on this, and we're talking about early stage investing, on this basis of who I want to go on that journey with these people. Who I want to work with them 1 day a week for 10 years. And a lot of people will say, we go for lunch, dinner, or drinks with them because I want to see whether we could be at least acquaintances and not friends. I want to talk about two things that are very much linked to what I just said, this particular process that I just led you through, but that go beyond it slightly. Which also shows you a little bit of the anthropological thinking or method. So theme 1 is excitement. One of the leading questions I had setting out to do this research was what really drives venture capital people? Do they just want to make money? I'll get back to that in a second. Quick answer is they actually don't make that much money. Is there any agenda behind their investing? And then the sub-question to that became very, very quickly, and what actually drives you as the venture capital investor to make that particular decision to invest in company A and not in company B? And the more interviews I did, the more people talked about, I need to be excited. So how do you take this decision about, yes, I want to go on that journey together, or I get along with these people? There's a lot of emotion involved. It's not only rationality. The rationality, which you would thinking about finance and banks and numbers and Excel sheets and money, rationality would be the first thing. You run a model and then you see this makes sense economically or it doesn't. The big problem here is these guys don't have numbers. We're talking about people that are idea stage. I want to change the world by doing X, Y, Z. I want to change the world by providing everyone with access to music for a small fee. That's Spotify, 15 years ago. If you don't believe in that idea, in the stage where they come to you before they've raised money, before they've got a product, before they've got a platform, before they've got a single subscriber, there's no numbers that you can look at. Right? But they needed money to start with because it was quite complex to get the license fees paid for. They needed quite a bit of money in the very beginning. And a fund like Northern, which sits in Stockholm, said, despite that happening in 2008, midst of the financial crisis, great model, we're going to do that. So there is a moment here when an entrepreneur is in front of you, and we talk about the entrepreneur again in a second, and presents a vision for this is what I want to do, and I think this is necessary for these and these reasons, and it's the right time, and we're going to change the world in this particular area by doing this. You need to be able to connect to the person, but also connect to the idea emotionally. Rationally, yes, the market is there. The timing is good because of these and these legal circumstances leading up to this. There's surely growth that we could see here because services that have tried that in the past haven't succeeded, but for these and these reasons. There is certain rationalities behind, obviously. Ultimately, a VC is an economic investor, they need to make money. But the final decision is not taken based on that because they couldn't push you over the boundary. That's what I've been seeing. The final decision is based on gut feeling. Imagine you do this 5,000 decks every year for 10, 15, 20 years. How many companies you see? you've got so many cases where, oh, this has happened in a different area, slightly differently, and it worked out or it didn't. That the experience feeds into snap decisions, basically. And what I think a lot of these partners have learned over the years is following these decisions, following these intuitions, following this gut feeling into, yes, this is great. And then again, ideally, hovering back saying, but we need to look again and search for red flags, as I described. There's an initial, I believe in the vision, and then you do a due diligence. But there needs to be a passion there, otherwise you wouldn't take it to the next level. And I also don't think you would make a final investment decision. So the journey and the need to be wanting to be on that journey together is an absolute key driver of this very specific financial decision, which goes or went against my intuition in the beginning, because from the outside, a VC looks like a financial investor that operates like a bank. And that, I think, doesn't happen in the same way in the bank, particularly not if you think about the trends happening there at the moment, which is algorithmic trading. There's no feeling involved anymore. It's a programmed computer decision in a split second that the human being doesn't even control anymore. And that was another initially surprising, but on second thought, totally central finding that only recently came up in quite a few conversations with investors. Going one level deeper, why do you get excited about a person now in particular? We're talking about the entrepreneur. Because these early stage investors, if you ask them, and what gets you excited? Yes, the vision, for sure. But it's ultimately the entrepreneur that has to carry that vision out, right? You can have a great idea, but if the investor doesn't think that that particular person can make it work, it won't be an investment case. You need a person that you trust to take this vision to the people. And there are certain qualities that apparently in the past have proven to be successful or to be producing successful entrepreneur. And that's what somehow in a lot of investors' minds has now arrived as this is who we're searching for. And one of them is a broken kid. I've had this twice independently and have then since checked it with some other people. What does that mean and why? So basically, there's a very well-known investor in Zurich who only recently started their own fund. And he's one of the big German-speaking men on the scene. And he says, if I find that in the team, one of the leading characters comes from kind of a problematic childhood, single parent, had problems in school, just about made it through, definitely didn't grow up rich and satisfied, and that's ultimately the point. That's a great reason for me to investigate further, because these people are still hungry. They want to change something, they want to do something. Ideally, the idea that they have is actually connected to a problem that they identified very early on. It might be connected to a problem that they had themselves when they grew up in this very particular problematic circumstance, whatever the problem as such comes from. But almost unethically, they think people that aren't born rich are much better entrepreneurs. Because they've seen different things and have the power and energy and hunger to change them in comparison to somebody who's born into a millionaire's family. And that is complemented by another type that venture capital investors really love and search for, which is a serial entrepreneur. It doesn't really make sense because if you look at the big current companies out there, Microsoft, Amazon, they were all first founders. They didn't do anything before. Bill Gates started Microsoft at one point, and Apple was similar, and hasn't really done anything since or before. That was his thing. He was definitely not a serial entrepreneur. You might be able to argue he has since become one, but the big thing he did was his first venture. So intuitively, it might make sense, oh yeah, he's done it before, and I'm searching for these people that have successfully exited companies, and that's something that is relatively easy to check, unlike the first bit, potentially. if you've been the Spotify founder, and that's one of the first employees / founding team of Skype, who's now doing TransferWise, he got money very quickly because they saw, oh, he's been with Skype since the beginning for almost a decade. He can do entrepreneurship. There's a certain validation, which intuitively to me doesn't make any sense, but to the VCs just simplifies things so far that they say, we give him money very quickly again. To jump it up a little bit again, these were two examples of things that I found, which I found counterintuitive, surprising. And I'm going to follow more in my research. What drives investment decisions? Is this rationality or is it emotion? Who are people actually investing in? What's the kind of ideal founder that you're looking for? But there's a couple more things that I just briefly or more briefly wanted to mention that again go against some of the beliefs that we might have if you hear venture capitalist, and the emphasis here is particularly on capitalists, thinking about the second point here. What are they doing? What are they searching for? One of the questions that drove me in the beginning was, what are VCs actually searching for? And whoever of my friends I talked to about this, they said, oh yeah, they're interested in it for the money. And my immediate answer to that is immediately, but they could make much more money, much more quickly in private equity. It's the same job, in a sense. The same path, while there is not really a path. But you work similar hours, but your payout is secure. There's no questions asked. While in a venture fund, if you actually don't make back the money that you collected to start with, so you get 50 million from institutional investors that kind of trust you with their money, and you promise them to pay them back more, but you might promise them to make 2-3 times that money. So you promise them to make 150 out of the 50, but if you only make 120, you don't really get any of the big money. They don't even get what you promised them, but they take everything that you earn in profit. While in private equity, this is much less likely to happen, and you make much more money also as a low-level employee, talking about partners mostly, much more quickly and much more securely. So it can't really only be the money. There must be something else. And one of the things that I'm going to look for as I go along, particularly in the States, because some of the narratives I had in Europe were shockingly all about the finances. But if you look at Andreessen Horowitz, or when it comes to that matter, somebody like Elon Musk, who's not a venture capitalist, but he's very much an entrepreneur / investor, they have a vision. They want to change something. They believe that electric cars are a necessity for us if we want to survive as humanity, and so is going into space in practice. So I'm going to do everything in order to drive that vision. And that's what I'm hoping to find much more in VCs as well. Connected, what I just talked about, there's not that much money to be made in VCs. Most funds live off the management fee, which is about 2% of the money that they collect. So you raise a 50 million fund, and you are allowed to pay yourself out 2.5%, 3%, depending on the contract, over the period that you raise this fund for as your salary, basically. Which, given that you'd be a 5, 6, 7 people team, isn't that much. And in the end, most funds actually fail, i.e. they don't really make money back beyond this 50 million, sometimes even not even the 50 million. And one last thing which I found kind of on the side is not totally surprising and mirrors what you see in banks and other financial institutions. There's not really a career path in VCs. That's definitely very different from a normal bank, where you might all know there's very specific times when you can apply, and there's very specific times when you interview, and there's very specific graduate schemes. That all doesn't really exist in the venture world. It's quite a complicated thing to get into, and you normally can't really start out of your bachelor's. They wouldn't hire you full stop. You have to do something interesting as an entrepreneur. You have to have certain interesting business experiences. I think the typical starting age in VC is 25, 28, 30 plus. So the career path is not that straightforward as it would be in other financial institutions. But the lack of diversity is. There's no women, and there's no ethnic diversities. And in the States that might be slightly different, but there's about 1 out of 10 partners, so people that take the decisions on where the money goes, in Britain are women. And I'm in the process of writing a piece about that, because if we think back to what I said in the beginning, these people drive how our economy looks like in the future. How is it possible that we exclude 50% of people of making these decisions? So they love personality, but only in their own kind. They hire themselves, is what I'm saying. So these are 3 other bottom-up things that I found talking to people without having searched for them, which again is an interesting example of how anthropology works. I don't really go into the field answering or trying to answer questions. I go into the field trying to see what drives these people directly. But what that leads to is also more questions and no answers. So this is the kind of thing, I just made this 2 days ago and sent it to a couple of VC partners already. This is the kind of thing I take to an interview. What are you interested in? They all want to know, you're writing this book, yeah, but what's this book going to be about? And that's the 3rd one-pager. They all love PowerPoint slides. The 3rd one-pager I made in order to describe. This is the current framework that I think in when it comes to questions for my research. So I think a lot about time at the moment. How did I go from the past, revenue numbers from a year ago, what have you done in the past, what does your CV look like as an entrepreneur, who have you worked with before, references, to the present, what are you currently trying to do? Do you have a team already? What's the market like? Have you sold a product already? What does your product look like? To the future. And that's where it gets particularly interesting for me. How do you think about the future? What kind of a future do you want to make? And how do you then get that under control? Because all of that is very, very uncertain, which is why this is all expectations and beliefs and not facts. What kind of tools do you use in order to capture that? Can you actually capture that? And how do you, in this tool application process called due diligence, if you want, how do you, given the right timing, make an investment decision and ultimately actually get to the payout? So as I said, this project is ongoing. I'm actually about to go to San Francisco next week for a couple of weeks for the first time and hopefully speak to a couple of people there. And I come back next year and report on some more findings. I'd give us another 10 minutes if there's certain things that you want to discuss, be it about the things I just said, or much more generally about VC. As I said, I worked on this side in first corporate venture in London, and then the family office / venture fund in Germany for the last 6-7 years. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. First of all, thanks a lot for coming.
Actually, you said that venture capitalists, they lend money to they give money to companies, and then they get part of it back depending on the income. So does this mean that they are in fact loaners and not stakeholders?
So the money flows as follows. In a traditional venture fund, which is why it's called a fund, the venture partners would raise money from institutional investors. And institutional investors could be anything from a high net worth individual, like Bill Gates, but he wouldn't give money to a VC fund, to a pension fund. So the British teachers would have a pension fund that kind of needs to continuously invest its money in order to be able to do the payout. That would be people that give money to a venture fund. Then you do the fundraising as it's called for 6 months to 12 months, and then you sit on 50 million. Let's make that example. And that 50 million is then capital you have to pay back to these institutional investors at the end of an agreed upon period, normally 10 years, could be 8, could be 12, could be 14 maximum, with an agreed upon interest normally. Depends a bit on performance, but you normally have to promise them more than they should give you. And what happens then is that this money is kind of classified as your own for this particular period until you have to pay it back. And then you invest in over that time period, and you really only spend the first year or two on the investing of that money. You invest 50 million in 10, 15 entrepreneur ventures. And investing in that case means buying equity. So the company comes, is early stage, and they are doing a new authentication system. Because in the UK, actually, you will have to, the law is currently going through Parliament, prove that you're over 18 in order to gamble online, and prove actually that you're over 18. Not click, I'm over 18, but prove, either with your credit card or identity paper, that you are allowed to gamble. And there's a couple of services that already take that problem on, because it's a given that you have to deal with it somehow, and not everyone wants to give that information. You don't want everyone to know, this is me, I live there, and I have these bank details. So there's a company that I spoke to just last week that says you can go to the newsagent, they prove for you that you're over 18, and give you kind of a voucher back that you can, on your phone, then just have scanned, and in that particular moment they know, the gambling site online knows that you're over 18 without knowing anything more about you. It just ticks you're over 18. So that company says valued 5 million, and you want to buy 20% of that. So you have to give them 20% of 5 million, £1 million. And with that £1 million investment, you own 20% of that company, which would usually come with a board seat, for instance, if there has already been established a board. If not, you likely establish a board, so that you have a certain say about what they do or don't. And as the company grows in value, so next round, in about a year and a half, the company valuation has grown to from 5 to 50 million. Your share, you still own 20% of that company, has grown accordingly by 10. And as the company grows more and more, your share ideally grows more and more with it. Not the percentage, but the absolute value. And that's how you make money.
And so at the end of the 10 years, when you have to pay back all the millions, you sell back all your shares into the company?
That's a very good question. Who's buying venture capital companies? Because you don't, normally at least, you don't sell the shares back into the company. There's about 2 to 3 exits that are imaginable. One is the company goes public, relatively straightforward. You do an initial public offering, you kind of, as an investor, offer your shares that you have, so the 20% of the company that you own, to the general market. And then investors come and buy shares rather than equity. Like that, you can make money back. The other one is you exit, sell the company to a bigger player. So this particular case, authentication, for instance, you can imagine Amazon wants that, or something like Spotify. And they might buy the company for an agreed upon sum, and you might even be part of that negotiation process, and they pay you out, basically. They pay you for the 20% you own. And they pay the owners, the original founders of the company, who ideally at that point still have a certain percentage. But that might have been diminished to about 5, 6, 7%, as well as all of the other equity holders, and then own the company themselves. And the third one is a strategic investor that might or might not have anything to do with the company. You see that a lot in, say, the automotive sector, where the big automotive companies like BMW, VW, they're thinking a lot about electric cars, but some of them think it'll take another decade. So for now, we're just buying certain innovative startups that make certain bits that we would then be able to use. That's about the 3 exit options. And sometimes you don't find anything. Sometimes you don't find somebody who takes stuff away from you, and then you just have to go with it. That's why the period is a little bit more flexible, and it has to be 10 years.
You said that most VC funds fail. Have you done the numbers on that?
I don't really do numbers, but I can send you the numbers, yeah. Failing means that they don't make money beyond the money that they have to, in my case, yeah, that's why I was in the company, beyond the money that they have to pay back. So in Europe in particular, there's an interesting thinking process about that, which is quite different from what you get in the States, which is why likely the investment outlook here is also slightly different from what happens over there. We're happy often with making 2 or 3x. So investing in a company and hoping that it's worth 3 times as much, our shares worth 3 times as much at the end of the exit period. If that was a thought for, or if that was the expectation for US VC, they would never do it. They're only doing potential 100x investments. They're only looking at, this is 100% there's a 100% possibility for this to be a unicorn. There can be all kinds of things happening on the way. Much more risk is what I'm saying. Willing to take much more risk in the States than here. We are often happy with, oh, this has worked in the States, and now somebody takes the same business model, copies it into Russia or China or India or Eastern Europe, and it's surely going to make some money. But it doesn't have to make 100 million, 150 million. It's fine if it makes 3 or 4 or 5. And that in Europe often leads to the fact that you kind of make enough money to pay the thing back, but you don't really make fundamentally more. While in the States, or the fund that advised already knows, they did Spotify in 2008 and ISAT in 2012. Spotify just went public and ISAT was just sold to PayPal or something. They made their fund back 6-7 times just this year, just because of that. But that was both heavily risky investments that at the time of the financial crisis, nobody would have done that. And that's why they were quite alone out there taking that risk. But that's the difference in investment outlook. But at the same time, the risk comes with more failure as well.
How about crowdfunding? Is it easing into this VC market? Would you recommend it?
I think it's the other way around. I think crowdfunding for something like a VC, potential VC startup case, is what the companies get that don't get VC money. You wouldn't really do crowdfunding if you could have VC. Because what is complicated is to have many, many people as part of your pie. It's a bit like shareholders. Right? Shareholder value or shareholder structures are very complex. You need to manage a lot of different interests, which is why they have to host. First of all, it comes with a lot of public reporting problems. Now talking about shares, but the crowdfunding bit can be similar depending on how you set it up. You have to talk about certain things with many more people. You don't necessarily want to do that. And you also you're kind of responsible to many more people. VCs, typically the rounds would be 3, 4, 5 funds maximum. So you start with a handful of angels when you begin with your enterprise. They know something about your particular industry. They can give you something beyond just the money. They have expertise and can help you. That would be a handful. And then you get 1, 2, 3, 4 VCs on board if you need more money and if your case is the right one. But that's about it for the first 2, 3, 4 years. So you only really have to talk to 10 people. Imagine you do a big crowdfunding campaign and you have 150 people that want something from you in one way or the other. And crowdfunding will never raise 25, 30, 40, 50 million. There is a potential imaginative case to be made for, I need to make this product because before I haven't got it in my hand, nobody will believe me what I can do with it. And that might be something where I'd say, yeah, crowdfund it first and then see whether you can take it up. But often I think what you see on these crowdfunding pages is the other way around. They would try and go a more conventional, if you want, road with, they got some money from friends and family, they have an angel investor or two, and then they want to raise a bigger round, but that fails, so they go back down to crowdfunding. That's how I see it. 2 more perhaps, and then
Do VCs invest in conventional financial markets when they don't have companies that they can? So what do they do with that money that they've taken from institutional investors? And
it's a big problem, which is why fund size has gone up quite significantly. A 50 million fund nowadays is like, you could raise that if you've worked in the industry for 2 or 3 years. It's relatively common and easy to do, which is why the number of VC funds has also gone up. The funds have gone bigger, but that is also because rounds have gone much bigger, particularly in the States, but also here. So raising a 500 grand seed round, nobody does that anymore really. They're all raising 1.5 million, and then the next round is 5, 6, 7 million, not 2 or 3, which is, even when I started in 2013, was totally normal. Like the first round was not 5 million pounds, definitely not. So round sizes have just gone up, fund sizes have gone up. But that comes with the problem that sometimes you can't get rid of your money. So a lot of funds, what they do is they diversify a little bit in that they reserve, typically, it might just be narrative / strategic talk, quite a bit of their fund for follow-on investments. So how you think about the development of a startup is not static, it usually just develops, right? So even if you are an early stage investor, you give 500 grand in a seed round to a company. They're doing well, great. They're raising another round in a year and a half, or 3, 4, 5 million. You give them another million on top, increasing your share the whole time, right? They're doing great still. They're raising a Series B, 25 million. You give them another 5. So you kind of want to reserve some bit of your fund, which absolutely is actually quite a bit. Thinking 50 million fund, you want to have 20 million there for follow-on investments for your winners, because you don't want to be invested in the same percentages in all of your losers, and 80% of the companies will fail. You will definitely make your money / make even more than your money with 3 or 4 out of your 15. You want to invest heavily in the winners, and you will see that after 3 or 4 years, so you still have a bit of time left, and just keep your losers at the same level, basically. Which I've never heard of would be CVC, because in their contract with the institutional investor, it will say, this is what I'm going to do. This is kind of my investment bracket, what I'm doing. And it will not say, oh, and if the money can't be deployed, I'm investing in shares on real estate. That would be, we could do that, but just because we didn't raise foreign money.
So they just hold on to it as...
Yeah, and sometimes they, I mean, I think it's quite rare that you just get rid of all of your capital exactly.
So in the West, it's getting increasingly popular for firms to go to VCs to get funding, especially in America. And my question is it also a trend in the East, so like in Asia or emerging markets? And if so, you described some differences between the American and the European VC philosophy or VC sentiments. And is there a much larger difference between like developing market VCs and Western VCs, and what are these differences?
I mean, think about a market like China that is now, again, I'm not perfect with numbers, but is now almost every bit of money that is spent in China in VC is almost as much as the money spent in the States. So in terms of just capital deployed, they are massive already, and that's just China, which you cannot, I wouldn't classify as a developing nation anymore, but it's not on par with America, perhaps, if you want. And it was originally planned to go there for me as well, but given that I only have a certain amount of capital to spend myself in terms of fieldwork and time, the US is already going to be a hard nut to crack. It's not as easy, not really having too many contacts in there now, and even more complicated with China, which I think might even be more based on networks. And this is never, I didn't even say anything about that, but there's not a single social science book written about this industry. And I think one reason for that is that access is not easy to negotiate. You can't just turn up there and say, oh yeah, I'm writing about you, tell me what you're doing. So one reason for me to turn my work experience into this was also, the world should know about this, and I have the access. And I think the more you go east, and Japan, for other reasons, they are more classified as part of the Western ecosystem. Something like SoftBank, you would have all heard about, potentially the biggest and most important VC investor in the world at the moment, despite Saudi money being in there, funding 50% of it. That would be almost more of a Western type fund. Very growth capital focused, like they don't do early stage. They write 100 million checks, not 10. Bracketing Japan out, but also there it would be hard to get contacts out of nowhere. It would be very interesting to compare how does a Chinese investor think about investing versus, or a Japanese, or Taiwanese, or Vietnamese versus an American or a German. But my study is likely going to be Germany versus UK versus US in equal parts. Great. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.